All right, folks. I just want to make sure that I sound okay. There we go. All right. Sounds like the sound is good. No more chipmunk nonsense like yesterday. With that said, welcome back to the DUI Guy Plus, raw, law, unfiltered, with your host, myself, the DUI Guy, as always. Buckle up, folks. We have a lot to cover. A lot. What a jam-packed day. We started at 9 o'clock in the morning, Pacific time, and it literally just ended. 3:45 local time is when the prosecutor wrapped up his closing. The jury is out to deliberate as we speak. They probably already went home because they usually get out between 4 and 4:30. They don't deliberate in the evening hours pursuant to the court's orders. But today was closings. And boy, what a day it was. As you can see from the title, I have not changed my mind since yesterday. I know it may seem a little, some people have made some comments in the comments section that, well, Larry, how, you don't have a lot of data to go on and this and that. You do realize, even though I was not in the courtroom, I still kept up with as many of the facts as I possibly could. Like, I couldn't recite them to you all from memory, obviously, but I kind of have a gist of the public opinion of this case. I know some of the testimony of some of the witnesses, what it was going to be, because that stuff has been around for months now. So with all of that in mind, I want to dive into what I saw. I was in the courtroom. I watched the jury listen to what felt like three people speak. Really, it was only two, the prosecutor and the defense attorney, Mr. Mueller and Mr. Cohen. But realistically, it was almost like there were three parts to this trial, to this closing, rather, in this trial. So first, we had Mr. Mueller with his closing. Then kind of like the appeal with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, kind of a very similar vibe. California criminal trials have, because the prosecution has the burden of proof, they get a chance to have two bites at the apple. They do the initial closing, if you will, then the defense responds, and then the prosecution has an opportunity to reply. And boy, oh boy, reply they did. So I titled this, in 2 days, Danny Masterson will be found guilty by a jury. That's approximately Thursday. That's when I think they're going to come back. And that's when I think they're going to render their verdict of guilty based on everything I saw yesterday and everything that I saw today. So today, I definitely got a chance to observe the jury for the longest period compared to previous times, like yesterday, for example. So let's dive in, shall we? So Mr. Mueller starts. The judge, right before the closings begin, judge instructs that if anyone gets emotional in the audience, to please leave the room. She does not want any nonsense in her courtroom, kind of like Judge Ascarati kind of thing. If you don't feel like you can contain yourself, there's the door. Please do not interrupt or disrupt it for the jurors. So Mueller begins. And right out of the gate, he, compared to from what I hear, since I wasn't there, in his opening was very, very dry and very factual, because he didn't really have the evidence in the case yet. Now that all the evidence is in, now is his chance, and you could sense, you could feel his emotion. So the prosecution paints Daniel Masterson as someone who, like, remember the man as who he was during the assaults. Not this polished, dressed up individual, groomed, and every day he comes in, polished and shaven, not shaven, wearing a suit and tie. Don't look at that. Imagine the Masterson as he was abusing these victims. That's like right out of the gate. He completely colors the entire opening with that. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant, a brilliant move. Normally, DAs, prosecutors are usually very dry. They don't have panache. They don't have force behind their language, and for rightful reasons. Usually, it's the defense's job to be colorful, and not Mueller. Mueller was absolutely on the ball. And in the very beginning, as you might expect, but it's not still the dead giveaway. You can't rely on this right out of the gate, but because the day just started, the closing just begun. Um, Jurors appear attentive as the plaintiff goes through Danny Masterson's conduct, the dousing of the victims, the raping of the young women. And by the way, I know I throw that word, the R word, and somebody commented like you're gonna get demonetized and all this. I am speaking factually. I'm not describing like my own personal experience or anything crazy to where I think it should be alerting the censors or in YouTube's bowels. I'm simply speaking fact. So I don't think I'm going to be running into any trouble. So thank you, honestly, thank you for your commentary. I really do appreciate it. But I think we are good because I'm not like accusing someone of that or talking about my own personal stories, which would be horrifying, God forbid, having to go through that. Um, just real quick, this is a great question. Wild Mercury Films. I do think Cohen is a great attorney. I think he did the best job that he possibly could in this case, which we'll get to in a moment. So if you stick around, you'll get to hear everything I have to say about him. I think he's a phenomenal attorney, to answer that question. All right. So um, at the very, very beginning, when the prosecutor goes through Danny Masterson's conduct, the dousing and the raping of young women, there are several jurors, and this is extremely rare to have that right out of the gate. If they do it right out of the gate, that's when like, who do they nod to first? Or who do they nod to at all? Is there some attorney that they don't nod to at all? That is going to be a huge factor. And they're right out of the gate. Some are even hinting at slight nods immediately, almost as Mueller starts talking about Danny Masterson's conduct, which is a huge, huge like red flag if you're Masterson or his attorneys, because the prosecution. I mean, sometimes you can't undo what has been done in closing argument, like the whole trial. What's done is done. You're not going to be able to change it. You can't change the testimony once both of them close. Okay? All right. So 10 minutes in, jurors appear to be listening. And this is what I wrote down. Again, I write my impressions. It appears as though they have already made up their minds. This is like 9:05, 9:07 in the morning. Thomas, if my title is not a dead giveaway, you need some assistance, my friend. You need some help. So 15 minutes in, there's a young blonde woman. I believe she might be with the Scientology community. I'm not sure. I believe so. I saw her like kind of saying hello or whatever to some of the other Scientologists in the room when we were taking a break. So I don't know. She kept like going in and out and in and out and in and out several times. I thought at first like, oh, maybe she got emotional or something about what the prosecution said. She came back, no tears, no handkerchief, no nothing. Just, I don't know. She just left several times. I just wrote down the talk was about the expert about the difference between stranger danger rape and acquaintances, and this is a huge point that Mueller had to make in his closing, and I thought it was absolutely phenomenally done. Is that a lot of every single one of these women, it wasn't like Danny Masterson was hiding in the bushes and pounced on them and assaulted them or whatever. These are women from his life that were like in the same circle of friends. There was an element of trust. This is not just some complete random stranger jumping out at you in the park. She had every single one of these Jane Does. She had like an element of trust, of belief, of having been betrayed, right? Betrayal by someone that you thought was your friend or your, it's such a big difference. And jurors noticed that. Jurors absolutely paid attention to that. And Mueller, the prosecutor, highlighted it. And it was very, very important for the jurors to understand. that every single one of these was not only physically violated, but emotionally, and not just emotionally and physically, but also, um, is going to have trust issues probably moving forward for the rest of their lives. When when the prosecutor begins discussing John Doe number 3, and that she had to become a Scientologist, abandon friends and family, because like two of these women, in order to start dating Masterson, they had to basically ostracize their entire friends and family, become Scientologists, join this community, and then and only then would Masterson continue dating them. And Jane Doe number 3 was one of those. And when again, when the prosecutor started talking about the fact that they had become Scientologists, abandoned friends and family, a few jurors hinted at a few slight nods once again. And I thought it would be a recurring theme, but it only happened a few times. So pay attention to those as I go through my notes. Mostly they're remaining stoic. Even at that juncture, they were still remaining stoic. Okay. Danny Masterson himself, by the way, periodically scowls as Mueller is going through his closing. Absolutely baffling to be in a courtroom where your freedom, your future is on the line, and you're just kind of like, okay, like scowling and scoffing. He didn't do much more than that, but he was looking at the prosecutor very intently as the prosecutor spoke. Danny Masterson was looking at the prosecutor very intently. When the prosecutor pointed his finger, there was a moment, because when you're doing a closing, it's almost like a theatrical performance. If you don't think that's true, then you are lying to yourself, okay? Because the courtroom is a theater. Just like a war zone is a theater of war, in the courtroom, it is also a theater of the metaphorical war between you and opposing counsel, each trying to prove their case, one beyond a reasonable doubt, and the other simply trying to throw doubt onto the case, right? The defense. There was a moment when the prosecutor points the finger directly at Danny Masterson and talks about like one of these women, how difficult it would have been for them to come out and say, this guy is a rapist, kind of thing. And he points the finger very intently at Danny Masterson and says, how difficult it would be. Not a single juror nodded. And I found that to be a little surprising. Maybe because they were just, again, they're very, very respectful of the whole process. But at the same time, they don't want to just like openly be like sitting there nodding. But I still found that a bit surprising. I thought like maybe some of them will be holding back some nods, or maybe kind of like they were literally stone, like made out of rock in that moment. And I think, again, it's because these are very, very serious accusations, especially when you say things like that in open court. Jurors are reluctant to show what they're feeling, especially because the entire audience is trying to read them, including myself. So I don't blame them. I don't blame them one bit. Now, about 30 minutes in, about 9:30 in the morning, juror number 11 appears to be getting a little bit emotional as the prosecutor is describing Jane Doe number 3's attempts to get into a relationship with Danny Masterson after. So there's a whole category of story. Like Jane Doe number 3 is the one he had the relationship with for 6 years. And afterwards, there is a brief period when, and the defense made a huge point of this, where they actually get back, not together, but she like kind of thinks like maybe he's changed. Maybe he's changed, and they meet up in a hotel in New York, and then there's another incident, and they have sex and they have relations, during those meetups. And Jane Doe number 3 testified that she, thought, well, maybe he's changed. Maybe he's a different person. Maybe he's a better person. Maybe we can be together. Like she has this hope, right? It's so very realistic. The defense, I'll just jump real quick. The defense tried to make it look like, come on, this is a person who has been allegedly sexually assaulting you for the last 6 years, and here you are just like meeting him up randomly, voluntarily going into the hotel room and this and that, trying to make it look like relationships are these rigid non-fleeting things. And to me, that just says that the defense does not understand that relationships are fluid. Relationships don't have like sometimes a very clear beginning and a very clear end. They make it look like relationships can live in a vacuum, and that is not true. That doesn't make any sense. And the jurors, I think, saw right through that. Jurors are human beings. They understand. They understand that relationships are not start here and here. Ready and go. Go, 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 go. All right, it's done. All right, next relationship. Ready and right here. Stop. Okay, go, 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 go. That's not how relationships work. And the defense did their damnedest to try and show that, which we'll get to in a moment. I don't think it worked. I don't think the jury bought it. And I think by showing that Jane Doe number 3 was disappointed when she saw that Danny Masterson is that same old person that he used to be. Juror number 11 got emotional. He's I believe a Hispanic male, maybe in his mid 40s. He was mostly stoic, but that was the first and only time that I saw him show any type of emotion. And I caught that. I absolutely caught. I even had a little bit like my eyes were getting wet just looking at his face. I'm not even joking because I felt what he was feeling, and I was a little surprised. That was the only time during the entire closing that anyone, from my perspective, that I was able to see genuine, like extreme emotion. Extreme emotion. That was the only time that happened. Maybe he has some personal experiences that he's tapping into. Maybe that particular part just struck him for whatever reason. I don't know. I have no answer because obviously I can't talk to them. But that's definitely something that I can report back to you all. All right. So JB, she's Jane Doe number 1, I think. Yes. Jane Doe number 1. With respect to her assault, so her assault was he was penetrating her vaginally, which she did consent to initially, but then he went to anal sex, and juror number 3 in that moment folded her arms and scowled very, very visibly. That was very, very hard to miss. Her shower, so her whole thing was the shower in the bed incident where she threw up all over herself, so he decides to unclothe her and shower her, and then she's like, all right, okay, and then they go to the bed and she's like, all right, and then the assault is actually going from the vagina to the anus, right, going from vaginal sex to anal sex. And now even juror number 6 also folds his arms. He's an older male. Juror number 3 is an older female, also I believe Hispanic. Juror number 6 is white. Now, as the closing continues on, as the prosecutor begins to delve deeper and deeper into the details of the assaults of all these various women, jurors number 1, 8, and 11 now visibly nod. This is 45 minutes in to the prosecution's argument. And I believe this may or may not be either the last or the next to last time that anyone will actually show visible nods until much, much later, which I will get to, right? So this is like 9:45 in the morning, 9:50 in the morning. We started about 9:05 Pacific time. As the plaintiff calls Danny Masterson's act a forcible rape against John Doe number 1, that's when jurors 1, 8, and 11 distinctly had nods, visible nods. That was the biggest reaction that I saw today at that moment. It's almost like, again, you can smell it in the air. It's almost like they're agreeing with the prosecutor. Like they've already made up. I mean, that's what closing is, right? Closing is just a summary of what already happened. The jurors already have some type of idea. Some of them may have already made a decision. Like, I personally want to XYZ, convict, acquit, whatever it may be. And it seems like several of these jurors, number 1, 8, and 11, were directly on point especially, again, you got to pay attention. What is being said and what is the reaction and what's the congruence? Does it make sense? Does it relate? There's some jurors that will nod at everything. I've had jurors on my own juries that they will simply just nod and you're like, oh my God, I love this juror. This juror agrees with everything I'm saying. And you sit down and then the prosecution gives their closing and they're nodding their head the entire time too. And you're just like, oh crap. Well, that was no help at all. They just agree with everything that's being said, So you have to be careful. You have to be cautious. It's all about the acquisition of data points, plotting them on the graph. The more data you have, the better of a picture you can paint, the better you can understand. Again, for those of you just joining us, welcome to the channel. We're talking about Danny Masterson and the closing arguments today. The jury is probably, they gone home. They're going to resume deliberations tomorrow. All right. Now, the prosecutor continues. He argues that there is a letter in response from so because the Church of Scientology is against going outside the church and reporting incidents to the police, to the government, they're like, we have our own internal mechanisms for that. And he says that when Jane Doe number 1 tries to go through those mechanisms to try and report Danny Masterson for the assault that he did, that he raped her, she is actually being told that you're going to be labeled as a suppressive person. Now, the defense objects there, saying that it's not an evidence. It's overruled immediately by the court, and jurors shift uncomfortably in their seats. That was a very, very unique moment, because that was the first time that the defense argued that the prosecution said something that's not in evidence, and the judge immediately was like, no, sit down. We got this. Juror number 2, a young woman, shifts very uncomfortably in her seat about an hour in as they begin discussions about the non-disclosure agreement that Jane Doe number 1 had to sign, or else she's going to be labeled as a suppressive person, and her life as she knows it will be over. Again, there's like a whole theme here about what is this like suppressive person? Apparently, being a suppressive person might as well call you a child molester, basically, in the Scientologist community. That's how I understand it, right? If you're labeled as a suppressive person, you are dead. Nobody wants to associate with you. Nobody wants to talk to you. Your existence does not matter. You're going to be alienated, ostracized, excommunicated from the community, right? It's actually worse than rape. Or having anything to do with that. It's literally like your death sentence as far as your social status is concerned. And juror number 6 folds his arms again as the prosecutor begins to describe Jane Doe number 3's rape incident that is charged when Danny Masterson allegedly hit her. So we have a lot of very uncomfortable body language by the jurors, but they're all very, very much paying attention. And that's going to be a theme here with Mueller, the prosecutor. We'll get to Cohen in a moment. Like I said, we have a lot of ground to cover. I got the paper out of my notebook, so it's easier for me to go through it. So the Church of Scientology, this is what I've learned in this case, is very, very old school. Okay, they seem very like, if according to Mueller in his closing argument, he said some of the evidence has shown that it's almost like when there's a power disbalance, it's very old school. He's the one who put the roof over your head. He's the one that's been feeding you. He's the one. It's your job to basically put out. And when he wants sex, that's when you give him sex. It's like we teleported into the 1920s all of a sudden. Like, that's the Church of Scientology. And you know what? It doesn't surprise me. If any of you have seen Mad Men, I mean, that's when L. Ron Hubbard was alive, when Mad Men was real life. So to him, it's like, it's normal. It's normal when a man wants sex, man gets sex. Man put food on table. Man feed wife. Man give roof over wife's head. Man deserves sex. Man needs sex. Man takes sex. That's not rape. The Church of Scientology was telling some of these Jane Does, you need to look into yourself. What did you do wrong to cause him to rape you? What? What? You need to look to yourself introspectively to figure out what you did as a human being to cause the rape to occur, basically. It's maddening, absolute insanity. And when some of these Jane Does, like Jane Doe number one, try to go to the Church of Scientology and be like, look, I need your assistance, I need your help, can you all like help me? I think there's a big problem here, we need to maybe you can take some classes. Instead, they start taking her to class. And she's the one, because he is of a different, Masterson that is, he is of a different category. He's of a different class. He's higher up than you. He's a higher ranking official because he is a celebrity. He is giving us more money, blah, 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 whatever it may be. You are going to be labeled a suppressive person if you don't go through these classes. It is absolute insanity. Like absolute insanity. No wonder the Church of Scientology gets such a bad rep. You know, I know about very little about Scientology, like overall speaking, but I have learned more than I would like to know. Most of my Scientology knowledge comes from South Park. And by the way, they made a great episode about Scientology. So the Church of Scientology literally writes a letter and says to Jane Doe number one, this is kind of like an out exchange. He puts a roof over your head. He feeds you. He clothes you or whatever. It's your job to give him sex. It's maddening. Or maybe it was, I'm sorry, it wasn't Jane Doe number one. It may have been Jane Doe number three. I'm trying to get it all out to make sure that, and I may get my Jane Does crossed because it gets very, very confusing. The 1, the 2, the 3. But it's almost like, no pun intended, it's a tit for tat. Like it's absolutely insane. She hoped that the Church of Scientology had some sort of inherent justice system. That was her gullibility. Nothing happened. And she's going to be labeled as a suppressive person if she goes to the police. So she can't even go outside the church. And the church won't do anything. So she's completely trapped, completely stuck. Now, that was another time when numbers 1 and 8 very visibly nodded. When the prosecution called Danny Masterson's acts towards that long-term relationship girlfriend, again, I think it was Jane Doe number 3, as the charged incident, forcible rape. This is like the second or third time, when the words forcible rape came out of Mueller's mouth, talking about Danny Masterson's conduct, and now jurors 1 and 8 very visibly nod. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Both are older men. One is white and the other is African American. Then we take a break from 10:20 to 10:35. We'll come back at 10:40. We resume. Juror number 3. Yeah, the Church of Scientology absolutely killed Kenny. You got it, Kat in Virginia. Juror number 3 puts hand over her mouth very clearly, kind of like this, when the prosecutor begins talking about Jane Doe number 3's incident that Danny Masterson ordered her to get on the bed. There's a very clear incident about him telling her, you need to get on the bed, like ordering her around. And NT, I think was, I keep saying, this may have been actually Jane Doe number 2. NT, when sorry, I'm trying to decipher my notes here. This whole theme is really hitting home with the jury. I wrote JH. What is justice? I can't remember what. I need to be careful using abbreviations in my notes, I suppose. But essentially, there's this theme that he's been using throughout that I talked about, and it really seems to be hitting home with the jurors. At least it appears to be. Juror number 10 and number 5 kind of have this really blinking very, very hard. And when they look and turn to look at the prosecutor as they exit, I think, to go on the break. When the prosecutor says that he is confident that they will find Oh, I'm sorry. There it is. When the prosecutor says that I am confident that when you go back to deliberate, you will find him guilty. There's a moment where jurors number 5 and 10 blink very, very hard, and one of them even looks very intently at the prosecutor as they exit for the break. That's what it was. Again, it's these little body language cues that you need to pay attention to, and it's maddening. It's maddening how like open and receptive the jury was before when the prosecutor was speaking. Now, I wish I could say the same about Cohen. And this is when we come back from the break. It is now 11:30. Mr. Cohen, for the defense, begins his closing. Now, juror number one, right out of the gate, the older white male, fucking tuned out. He's not even looking at Cohen. He's just like kind of staring into the distance on the ground like he's watching an ant crawl across the pedway. Out of the gate. Defense counsel barely makes eye contact with the jurors as he speaks. Mueller was looking at the jurors as he spoke. He spoke with confidence, with fervor, with panache, with finesse. Cohen is kind of like he'll turn around, he kind of turn his back to them, to do a little 360, turn back at them. Very bizarre. Very bizarre. Normally, defense counsel should be a lot more confident in the way that they speak. Cohen is kind of like, seems to be going all over the place. And he does the same thing with his argument as well, as you will see. It's just a stark contrast between defense counsel and plaintiff's counsel, prosecution, excuse me. Just bizarre. As the defense attorney speaks about the fabrications and contradictions that you have seen in this case, and Number 7 broke out the whelp face. Remember the whelp face during the JD trial? Those of you who followed me in the Johnny Depp trial when I was doing these recaps for Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, remember the whelp face? Well, I have not seen a single whelp face during the prosecution's closing. The first whelp face that I saw was on juror number 7's face a few minutes into Cohen's closing. Ruh-roh. You never want to see that face if you're the one talking. That's the whelp face. Jurors number 3, 7, and 10 are, you can see them tuning out as Cohen is reading the language from the jury instructions regarding reasonable doubt. So he hasn't even gotten to the facts yet. All he's talking about is the definition of reasonable doubt that you will see in the jury instructions that were already read to you the day before, and you will get to see them again as you go back to deliberate, as you'll have a copy of the jury instructions with you. 3, 7, and 10 are already tuning him out. So now 1, 3, 7, and 10, not really listening. At 11:45, so about 15 minutes into the defense's closing, as the defense begins to go through some of the duties, the next thing he talks about is the duties of the jury, that you're not supposed to have bias or sympathy when you're deciding the evidence. I can literally see the judge telegraphing indifference and apathy by continuously looking at the clock on the wall. At least 2 or 3 times she glances at the clock, almost like maybe subconsciously. I don't think she did it intentionally, honestly. I really like the judge. The judge is really, really on point. I think her rulings are very honest, and she has not really shown bias. But I think subconsciously she's kind of like, as soon as the defense gets up there, she's like, what time is it? When is he going to be done? Maybe making sure we don't miss the lunch break. I don't know. I have no answer, but that's what she did. And I feel like she's telegraphing indifference. There was one moment when I actually missed what defense counsel said, but the judge admonishes them. This is strike 1 or maybe possibly even strike two if you count what happened during the prosecution's closing when defense stated objection not in evidence and the judge overruled it. So it may be, you can call this strike two. Judge admonishes now the defense to stick to the evidence. Unbelievable, unprecedented, not something you want to be experiencing as the defense counsel in a rape case of a celebrity or anybody. It doesn't have to be a celebrity, anybody, to be admonished like that by the court. So 15 minutes in, the defense hasn't even started talking about the evidence yet. This is like anybody who practiced criminal defense like myself will tell you, that is the hallmark of a losing case. Hallmark, when you haven't even 15 minutes in, you haven't even started talking about the facts of the case yet. When the facts are not on your side, you talk about everything except the facts. When the facts are on your side, you talk about the facts first, and then you talk about everything else. He hasn't even started talking about the facts 15 minutes in. The hallmark of how to argue in closing when you have terrible facts and probably a losing case. This is literally what I have in my notes. I had the prosecutors do this to me in my own cases. When they argue like this, when their case is complete shit, when they don't have good facts, I have all the facts and they have nothing. And usually you win these cases. The one with the good case talks about the facts. Mr. Mueller, the prosecutor, talked about the facts. And he is the one that's coming off to be with the stronger case. The prosecution's argument brought emotion to the jury. And the defense is drying them up. Unprecedented. Usually it's the defense that's the one that's supposed to bring out all the emotion, not the prosecution. The prosecution brought out all the emotion. The defense is literally drying them up. Unbelievable. Number 8, I think at one moment I thought I saw him falling asleep. I think it's like he has very much difficulty keeping he has like very, very heavy eyelids. So I wrote down, and I kind of take it back now because he was falling asleep, in quotes, for pretty much the whole closing of both. I guess I just noticed it during the defenses, but he has like very, very heavy eyelids. Plus he's wearing a mask, so it's very hard to tell what he's up to, but he seems to be paying attention. Now, in hindsight, I can tell you he was paying attention. That note is inaccurate after additional data has been provided. Now, when showing contradicting evidence, the defense does not speak with conviction. Cohen was trying really, really hard to show, look, you had this statement here and you had this statement here, and they don't match and they contradict each other. And she said this here and Jane Doe said this here. And then Jane Doe number 2 said this here and then they said this here. He doesn't speak with conviction. I even have a quote in here. Is that evidence that shows someone who felt pain 10 out of 10 with bruises all over, showing like a photo or whatever that contradicts the testimony? But the prosecutor made a great point in rebuttal stating that, look, this is a snapshot in time. This is not it's not a video showing like an hour-long interaction that day. The defense did not believe their own case. How is the jury supposed to believe you, Mr. Cohen, when you don't appear to believe in your own facts, in your own case, in your own client? That is the most devastating mishap that defense attorneys make, and I see it all the time. When you don't speak with conviction, you don't have to be loud or obnoxious or captivating, like, look at me and big, green monster, like the Incredible Hulk. No, just simply speak with conviction, and then people might at least kind of believe you. But I guess maybe he already lost hope. I don't know. Maybe he completely already lost hope during his closing. He doesn't appear to be believing in his own case, and by doing that, by not speaking with conviction, he's telegraphing that to the jury. That's what I felt. Juror number 3 looks like she's actually waiting for defense counsel to finish so she can go back to deliberate. At that moment, about 10:50, 10:55, I wrote down, or it maybe actually it should be 11:50. I could be wrong. So, yeah, I think it's 11. Anyway, number 5 is similar. Number 5 looks very, very bored. Juror number 5, as Cohen continues through his argument. This is the first time we get to see, and this is juror number 5, giving Cohen kind of like a side eye. She's an older white female, at least that's what it appears to be. Gives Cohen a lot of side eye, as a matter of fact. Reminds me, remember the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial? as I was talking about juror number 9, when Amber Heard was right over here testifying, juror number 9 was the closest one to her, and he was kind of like giving her the side eye, like as she was testifying. He was kind of like glaring all over the room, and then just kind of looking at her as she talked, and wouldn't turn his head very often to look at her. It was more like oh really? Like that's kind of what juror number 5 is doing with Cohen as he speaks. Not a good look, not a good sign, terrible sign. Now, don't forget, they're also looking at a PowerPoint over here. So sometimes they have to, but some of them will turn. Some very few, but they both have PowerPoints, by the way, the prosecutor and the defense, Mueller and Cohen. When Mueller would start talking after a PowerPoint, a lot of jurors would actually turn their bodies towards him, which is again indicative of the fact that you are interested in what the speaker is saying. And then they'll turn their bodies back to the PowerPoint, and then they'll turn their bodies back to Cohen or Mueller and go back and forth. With Cohen, complete opposite. They will turn their bodies towards the PowerPoint and then give Cohen kind of like the side eye as they listen to him speak. Sometimes not even giving the full luxury of turning their whole heads. Very, very important, very crucial, very, very reminiscent of the Johnny Depp trial. Again, not a side you want to be on. You do not want to be the one receiving the side eyes. Number 3, and this was absolutely gorgeous. I have not seen that look in a very long time, especially from a juror. Number 3, about right before lunch, she literally has the "Are you done yet?" look on her face. Like, "Are you done yet?" I can't remember if it was like this or like this, because she's done both to him. She's very facially vocal, if that makes any sense. She's got that "Are you done?" look on her face. And again, number 10 even glances at the clock. I don't know. She's trying not to be noticed. She's trying to be very slick. Like she waited for Cohen to kind of move this way, and then she kind of just does a quick little glance, trying to steal a glance from the clock. Like, I don't know. Is she hungry? Is she bored? Is she looking to get out of there? I don't know. But she glanced at the clock. And she now also, for a brief moment, has a whelp look on her face. Like, whelp? That whelp face, that whelp look on her face. Number 14, which by the way is not one of the ones who's going to go back to deliberate, unfortunately, but he, for the longest time, he has a "I don't understand what you're saying" look on his face. Like he's kind of like leaning as far back as he can, and he's just like what is going on here? Why did it, almost like why did somebody get me out of bed for this? Like what? I don't understand. He's like an older white male. And he's just not having it. He's just not having it. And a lot of side eye looking on his face towards Cohen. Now, around noon, this is right before the lunch break. Number 8 is still falling asleep. I wrote down, but again, as like I said, this was not 100% true. He kind of had that very heavy eyelid look on his face. It's just who he is. Number 10 appears apathetic. Now, number 2 kind of perked up. That was a little bit unusual. I was not expecting that. Number 2 perked up at the mention of the defendant going in depth on the inconsistencies by Gen B. He hasn't mentioned any of the inconsistencies yet, but he's saying that we will be talking about the inconsistencies after the lunch break. Now, she perks up at that because I think she may have been like obviously interested in that. So we take the lunch break. The defendant makes an objection that the prosecutor mentioned Scientology for the truth of the matter asserted. And the judge says, even if he did, I have an instruction that makes it basically nullifies it, and nobody cares. Basically. All right. Now we get to the juicy parts. Now we get to the real meat of today. Now we get, and by the way, it's interesting you make that point, Wild Mercury Films. Johnny Depp was extremely wise to hire Camille Vasquez and to just have a female lead attorney on a case like that. The fact that Masterson has Cohen leading the fray, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a male talking about rape and women making up rape allegations. Just doesn't, it just feels vile. It just feels bad. Like a male doing that, talking about, I don't know. A woman doing that, I think people would feel just a lot more comfortable just from a human standpoint. Forget the facts, forget the case for a minute. Just a person that is of the female sex, a woman up there would look a whole lot better talking about all these things, just because people will be more receptive to it, I think. Like a man talking about it just feels wrong, just feels weird. um I don't know, just an observation. All right, let's get to the juice. You guys ready? um for some reason that I cannot explain, Danny Masterson, who was seated, so the tables are as follows. You have the jurors right over here, right? The judge is like all the way in the back. Then you have the prosecution table and you have the defense table. Well, Danny Masterson was seated, like, I don't know if you can see, he was seated kind of like right here on the defense table. He switches seats with one of his counsel, and now he's seated at the head of the table. So he is looking directly at the jury, which I don't know why they suddenly made that the strategic change in the middle of closing. This is literally, we're 2 hours away from being done with the whole case, and all of a sudden you do that. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think it did anything other than maybe make the jurors feel more uncomfortable, because now Danny is staring right every single one of them in the fucking face. I don't know. That was absolutely bizarre, but he's definitely seen by the jury better. The defense resumes its closing at 1:30 p.m. local time. And about 5 minutes in, one of defense counsel has a huge grin, like literally like ear to ear, smile on her face completely randomly. Cohen is talking about like sexual assault and inconsistencies in Jen B's and Christina B's and all of that stuff. And all of the sudden, she's just grinning ear to ear. I couldn't help but notice. I'm literally staring her down going like, girl, are you serious? Like, I don't even care if you saw something on your phone that was funny. Somebody sent you a fucking meme of Santa Claus, making fun of one of his elves. I don't know. I don't care. You do not show that kind of emotion in the middle of a rape trial. Hold it in, woman. Jeez. That was absolutely... I mean, I say it would have been better if Cohen was replaced by a female defense attorney. I don't know if even a female defense attorney would have saved his ass. I still think he's going to get fucking crucified. That's not the point. I'm saying it would be better received. It would just make the room feel more comfortable than Cohen getting up there with his brute, brash... No offense, Cohen. You're a great litigator. But this is not your case. These types of cases are not your forte. And that's okay. It's not for everybody. You have to have a certain type of personality in order to be able to do these cases effectively. I personally don't think I'm a good one either. I've never tried a rape case. I don't think I ever would. I think it's not something I would want to do. I don't know what my future holds, but I can tell you I have never done one. I'm probably not good at them, and I've never tried, and I may never try. It's okay to not be good at something. You don't have to be like, I'm the biggest, baddest defense attorney, and I'm going to try them. No. So, Cohen, you did a great job today. A fantastic job. I very much enjoyed your closing. There are certain things that when I was listening to you, I even thought like, I'm going to steal that. A couple of them I can't because our jurisdiction does not allow for certain things. But as much as I would want to, I'd be like, oh my God, that's a great argument. I would steal it. But this was not your case, man. So I don't know. It was her smile, her grinning from ear to ear in the middle of this case was completely unprovoked. Totally misplaced. Nobody on the jury was smiling. Cohen wasn't smiling. The judge wasn't smiling. Nobody in the room that I could see was smiling. And for some reason, she's grinning from ear to ear. She's the one that switched seats with Danny Masterson. And she even kind of leaned into Goldstein and like, I guess, told her something. Even Goldstein didn't smile back at her. I don't know. I hoped, dear God, for Danny's sake, honestly, that the jury did not see his lawyer grinning like that, or I think it's a lawyer. I don't know. She's seated at counsel table, but I've never heard her speak. I don't know who she is. I have no idea who she is. I know that Goldstein and Cohen are both lawyers because they both spoke up and the judge listened to them. The other woman never raised her voice, so I don't know who she is, but she's speaking next to him. Nobody except 5 jurors, and actually 4 today, Andrea, were wearing masks. I don't think anybody in the audience was wearing a mask. None of the judge wasn't wearing a mask. None of the lawyers are wearing masks. None of the family members are wearing masks. Just 5 jurors are wearing masks, and even one of them took one off today. So there were 4 jurors with masks. Numbers 1 and number 7 we're giving very skeptical looks to defense counsel as he's starting to refer to finding Danny Masterson not guilty if you have reasonable doubt. That's crucial. When defense attorney starts talking about reasonable doubt and you must find him not guilty, which is one of the things that we do as criminal defense lawyers. It's true. You have to do it. Otherwise, you're betraying your client. But I was paying attention, like how receptive are the jurors to those types of words like reasonable doubt, not guilty, must find him not guilty. Numbers 1 and number 7, very skeptical looks. Number 7 is a white young female, by the way. Number 7, as I said, is an older white male. When Cohen starts talking about how JB, after being allegedly assaulted sexually, goes back to hang out with him later. Remember how I said Mueller even talked about how relationships are fluid and they don't have like a clear end beginning, not just like romantic relationships, but friendly relationships. And sometimes even, it's hard to decipher where psychologically, especially when you're like surrounded in the Scientology circle, because that's a huge underlying element of this whole thing. Like you might say, well, I was assaulted by this man. This was Cohen's argument. Why would I ever go back to talk to him? Well, if you have so many people linking back to you or linking back to each other, it's kind of hard to get away from that person completely and forever, because you know all the same people. When Cohen says that, like, why did she even go back? Number 12 brings his hand to his chin and begins stroking it. He looks like a middle-aged male, possibly mixed. I can't exactly tell what. It looks like there's maybe some, I don't know. It's so hard to say. I can't even tell what he's mixed with, but clearly does not seem to be just one thing. Very, very intelligent-looking middle-aged man. I very much enjoyed watching his reactions. Numbers 4, 5, and 12 even give major side eye as the defendant continues to suggest contradictions. So he's going through all this stuff, going through all the testimony of JB, and 4, 5, and 12 start giving major side-eye as he continues to suggest there's contradiction of testimony of JB and the absence of some text messages. He makes it a big point. Like, if this happened, and because some of the testimony was she received a text message from Danny saying, basically, you are going to come over and we're going to do this and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, where's that text message? This was like 20 fucking years ago, man. Even the jury's just like there's certain things you shouldn't argue, even though they may be like kind of okay, kind of good facts. But if they don't make any sense, you should just drop it. And the fact that you bring it up, he was getting major side eye from 4, 5, and 12, and rightfully so. When he starts talking about text messages that are absent from 20 plus years ago, this is 2001, 2002, 2003 that all this is happening. Number 8, I keep coming back to number 8 because, again, I thought he was like falling asleep. I'm going to move on. He's not. That's just how he is. Now, at 1:50, which is approximately, I don't know, let's call it about an hour, just under an hour since Cohen started speaking. And this is important. This is absolutely crucial. Not a single juror has nodded yet. From the moment that Cohen opened his mouth to when I just decided this is the point where I'm going to mention it because I still have not seen it, Nodding is not an end all and be all. Don't be fooled. Don't let this fool you. But when you've been talking for about an hour, comparing that to Mueller, when he started speaking, immediately there were several nods. Like 3 or 4 times I saw nods from various jurors. Some repeats, but definitely like 4 or 5 of them total were nodding in the like right out of the gate. Compare that to Cohen, where there for several, for an hour he's already talking, and not a single juror was like, like not even this. You don't have to literally be sitting there going like this. Just like a simple, like a simple, like a nod in agreement. Like you're listening to your friend tell you a story, and you're like, yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, I understand, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Like none, zero, fucking zero, zero. Not a good sign. Not a good sign. Now, remember I said the prosecutor mentioned that relationships can be complicated, don't have like a defined start and end. And by the defense going into saying that Christina B continued to sleep with the offender here, Danny, after the breakup. By the way, the prosecutor does not call him Danny. He calls him Daniel Masterson by his official name, because Danny, I think, gives him a little bit of a softer edge. Like, yeah, my buddy Danny, like my cousin Danny. No, this is Mr. Daniel Masterson, or the defendant, or the accused. That's the way prosecution usually rolls, and this case was no different. So the fact that Christina B continues to sleep with him after the breakup falls on deaf ears. Deaf ears. Number one still checked out. Remember I said how number one checked out from the beginning? Yeah, he hasn't checked back in yet. He is still checked out completely. When the defense attorney Cohen says jurors must accept like this thing or that thing, because he's referring to the jury instructions, where if you hear this inference, then you must accept, Number 7 looks at the floor and even like flips her lips, like very, very uncomfortable. Did not like that. Does not like being told what she has to or not believe. She has her own convictions, and she will not be told otherwise. That's how I took it. Number 2 looks to be tuning out now. Or sorry, is it number 12? Number 12. Number 12 looks to be tuning out now. 4 and 5 continue with the side eye with Cohen. And at 1:55 p.m., Cohen suddenly puts his hand in his pocket. You know how when people sometimes put their hand in their pocket? That is the absolute worst fucking thing you can do as a defense attorney while you're speaking and trying to be persuasive to strangers, right? Well, they're not really so strangers anymore. They've known each other for about a month now. That's not the point. The point is, when you're talking to people and you're trying to be persuasive, you do not put your hand in your pocket. Even if it's subconscious, that's even worse, because you're doing it unconsciously, which means that whatever you're saying you don't quite believe in and you're trying to hide stuff. That's what putting your hand in your pocket is when you're hiding stuff. Usually, not always, usually, but especially when you're speaking and trying to be persuasive, that's the antithesis to persuasion, is to put your hands in your pockets. He looks extremely unbelievable all of a sudden, magically. Look at that. Just because he's got his hand in his pocket. It's your bullshit detectors. It's your subconscious telling you that something is off here. Off. I think the trial was not televised. Obviously, the judge made a ruling, Joe No say, but the reason it was not televised is because they wanted to protect the identities of the women who were assaulted in this case, which makes complete sense. Yes, exactly, Rose. You want to seem open and believable, not acting all casual and sneaky like you're hiding something. Very great points, you guys. Very great points. I'm so happy to see Chad being on topic. Like that is so beautiful to witness. The prosecutor seemed very organized in his closing. This is one thing that I noticed, if I haven't mentioned it yet. Cohen is like all over the place. He's bouncing from victim to victim to victim to victim with no real cogency or coherence. Very, very difficult to follow. Very much reminds me, remember in the closing argument of Elaine Bredehoft and Rottenborn in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. They're just like, they're talking about stuff. You're just like, what are you talking about? How did you get there? Wait, you're talking about Jane Doe number 1 now or 2? I lost track. When you start as the in the gallery, if I'm losing track and I'm trying very hard to pay attention as much as I can, imagine what the jury is going through. They don't have law degrees. They don't have experience, practice, most of them being jurors. They're just there to listen to the story. The prosecutor, Mueller, gave them a story. He had a very clear beginning. He had a very clear middle. He had a very clear end. And he was going chronologically, victim number 1, timeline. Victim number 2, timeline. Victim number 3, timeline. Cohen is like, all right, by the way, victim number 3, this and that. Oh, inconsistency? Also, victim number 2, no timeline. Oh, yeah, by the way, victim number 3, also this. Also, victim number 1, inconsistency here. You're just like, where are you going with this? I can't, it's so hard to follow. When number 1, now remember I said he completely tuned out. When juror number 1 looks at Cohen, it's like he's looking at him with the utmost skepticism. He's got like one of these looks at him. He's just like. Number 3 will later give him that look as well. We'll come back to that when she does that. Now, around 2:03 p.m., as Cohen continues to argue his closing argument, he says, if a single piece of evidence points to both innocence and guilt, okay, so let's say we have one single piece of evidence, and it points like, yes, it could be guilty, but it also means it could be innocent. At the same time, he says, you must, this is a direct quote, infer innocence. You don't have a choice, he says to the jury. And at that moment, again, you can't miss it. Number 7 looks at him and whelps like the hardest whelp I've ever seen in my life. Like, without the eyes. That was my addition, excuse me. Watch my lips. Like the hardest whelp I have ever seen. This is literally the worst choice of words you can possibly have, especially in a case that is a rape case, you guys. Like, come on. You don't have a choice is not the kind of words that I would pick if I were the one, litigating this. This is terrible. Not just because it's a rape case, you're saying, you don't have a choice, because that's exactly what happens to rape victims. They are stuck in a situation where they don't have a choice. It also means, it also is bad on the fact that you are basically telling them what to do, like what they must do. Not smart at all. I did not like that. Again, it's Cohen's style. I understand it. He even made a joke at one point. He's like, well, it took me a while to get married. I married much later in life, and now that you all know me a little bit more, you can see why. That was a direct quote at the very, very beginning of his closing. Well, it says something about you, buddy. Fair enough, but don't admit it. Don't highlight it. Don't highlight the negative facts about you. You're there to do a job. Like, it's just, I don't know, very bad taste. And I get it. This is who he is. This is what he does. This is how he litigates maybe murder trials and other trials. But in a rape case, it just does not work. Does not work. At 2:05, just a couple minutes later, Cohen says JB testified that when the penis went from her vagina to the anus, that was accidental, and that Danny Masterson immediately apologized for that. The court stops him on a dime and says, that is not an evidence, and admonishes him to stick to the evidence. So he corrects himself. He goes, without apologizing, which is something you should never ever do when you're caught by the court. He says, but this is what JB says to the cop. The court stops him in his tracks and calls a bench conference. The whole room is in shock. Literally everyone is looking at each other. Myself and another attorney who's seated next to me were just like, oh my God, how? This is like the fourth time. There was not a single objection in both closings so far that has gone the defense's way. There has not been a single admonition of the prosecution when the prosecution spoke. And this is the fourth time that this is not going your way. It is absolutely mind-boggling. Now, something happened at the sidebar. Obviously, we can't hear it, but Cohen comes back and continues. I guess maybe it wasn't evidence. I don't know. But he just repeats the fact that JB testified. He may have not said the words testified at that point, but basically it was accidental, and that Danny Masterson immediately apologized. No further admonitions by the court. Number 11 scratches his chin when that happened. Number 1 is still tuned the fuck out. Number 2 and number 3 begin stroking their chins as Cohen talks about JB waking up next to him, to Danny Masterson, rather than hiding in the closet. So there's a big thing about JB. Her story, originally, when she went to the police originally, she said she remembers waking up next to Danny Masterson in the bed. Now, when she testified, when she took the stand, she said she was hiding in the closet. And she testified to hiding in the closet. But then when the defense attorney cross-examined her, and again, I wasn't there for this, but what he says that when he cross-examined her, he said, well, you said in the report, remember, you woke up next to him. You were not hiding in the closet and escaping the next day or whatever. And she goes, oh, oops, basically. I guess I did wake up next to him. Sorry, it's been like 20 years ago. I don't remember everything. But surprisingly, number 7 whelps again. She never whelped during the prosecution's closing, but she just keeps whelping during. It's almost like she doesn't believe. It just appears like she doesn't believe what Cohen is saying. Like she's already made up her mind. At one point, he even says, you know, if she lied about one thing, you can't believe anything else she says. It's. I'd like to say that is true. But sometimes, as we know, people forget things, especially when 20 years have elapsed. Sometimes victims, like to exaggerate things, which is the absolute fucking worst thing you can possibly do, and could, in theory, guillotine this entire case. I don't think that would happen, but anything is possible. So there it is. Now, at one point, Cohen tries to be a little sneaky. Cohen likes to be a little sneaky devil. And that's okay. Defense counsel is allowed to do that. That's sometimes it comes with the territory. He tries to misstate something that is written in the jury instructions. He says, like, basically, if, like, in the jury instructions, it says that if you don't believe a certain fact that the witness has said, you can disregard all of their evidence. And the prosecution now objects for like the 4th or 5th time now. Well, this is the 4th time during Cohen's closing, but the 5th time throughout the trial, because there was one, remember, incident when Cohen objected during the prosecution's closing argument, saying not in evidence, but it was. And the judge overrule the objection. So this is technically number 5. Cohen is 0 for 5. Mueller is 5 for 5 at this point. Unbelievable. The worst position you can be in when it comes to objections. Because he starts reading that, and the prosecutor says, Your Honor, objection, that's not what the instruction says. And the judge admonishes the jury again and admonishes Cohen that you are to, since closing argument is not evidence, you are to read the instruction and read my instruction to you and not interpret what Mr. Cohen or Mr. Mueller's interpretation are of the instruction. The instruction is what it is. It reads what it reads, yet blah, blah, blah. So then Cohen goes back and reads the full thing now. It contradicts himself. He says, if you believe that they lied, don't believe anything that they say originally. You don't have to believe anything that they say. And then after Mueller objects and the judge clarifies, he reads the full instruction, which basically says you are permitted to disregard the things that you don't believe, that you think they may have lied about, but believe everything else. He reads the instruction now. Holy Mother of God, why would you do this to yourself? It's almost like he wants to lose sometimes. At least that's the vibe that I get. Why would you lie yourself in closing argument to the jury and then clarify to them that you contradicted yourself? And what is a contradiction, really? Especially in closing, where you are supposed to be the most believable person in the room. You're trying to get your client acquitted of criminal felony charges. If they don't believe you, how the fuck do you think they're going to believe your client? My God. It absolutely drives me banana sandwich. Number 1 is still tuned out, by the way. He looks bored AF. This is now 2:15 p.m. Don't forget to like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you all for joining me. Oh, man. 2:15 p.m. Number 11 now starts giving the side eye as well. This is the first time he has really legitimately started giving side eye to Cohen. And 5 minutes later, number 3 has a semi-permanent whelp look on her face. I told you it was coming. She has a semi-permanent, number 3 has a semi-permanent whelp look on her face. And she looks at him through her eyebrows. Like, I don't remember what he was saying. I'm sorry. I was like, don't miss that. I don't remember what Cohen was saying at that time. He was still going through the evidence. He was just so all over the place. I couldn't keep track of him anymore. Number 7 and number 8, look at the screen, right? So we got PowerPoints on there, and they will barely even, as Cohen is speaking, their eyes are just married to the screen. Like Cohen is over here, right? And he's talking. Some of them don't even side eye him anymore. Like 7 and 8, they're just like, Cohen's talking. He's not even talking about something on the screen, and they're just like looking at the screen. They don't want to look at him. Not a good sign. This closing would work better if there was one victim, is what I wrote down. So why did I write that? Inconsistencies are very effective when you have one victim, especially if that victim, let's say, is very young or very old, or maybe has like some, sorry, I have something in my eye. I have some like medical issues or whatever that affect their memory. If you have those things, that's great when you have inconsistencies with one victim. But when you have 3 victims, actually 4 women testified. There was also Trisha V, that testified in this case. Inconsistencies are and the prosecutor completely creamed them in his rebuttal. So like every negative fact, like he hit her, no, he didn't. He penetrated her anus, no, he didn't. He raped her here. No, he didn't. Like that's literally what the defense is doing. It's like, no, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. That's inconsistencies. Nope, not believable. Not credible. Nope, don't believe. That works when there's one victim for the defense. Cohen picked the wrong defense for the wrong case. He picked this is so too many inconsistencies. But the problem is this is an old case, and we have 3 charges and 4 total victims. One of them not one of the victims he's not charged with. I guess because she came forward later, like after the charges have already been pressed, and he was indicted by information on the charges. It just doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. It would be great. It would work great if there was one victim. He needed a different defense, not a better defense, a different defense. Because inconsistencies, when you have 4 women and every single one of their stories is similar to one another, reminds me very much of the Paul. I tweeted about this. Reminds me of the Paul Flores case, because I was there as well for the openings, and so I got to hear the full story start to finish. The 4 women, I believe, in the Paul Flores, there were like 3 or 4 women in Paul Flores case. Every single one of them had a similar story. And by the way, the women in the Paul Flores case are extremely similar. Their stories are extremely similar in the Danny Masterson case. It's I had a couple of sips of the drink. All of a sudden, I am way more intoxicated than I should be based on the 2 sips that I had of that one drink, having no alcohol prior to arrival. Again, there was no discussion about the fact that allegedly Danny Masterson has drugged them, but that's exactly what it comes off. You don't need to talk about it. You don't need to talk about it. You immediately assume like you took 2 sips of a whiskey and all of a sudden you can barely stand, you can barely walk, and next thing you know, you wake up and your anus is on fire and your vagina it hurts like it's been pounded by a drill, like by a jackhammer, as one of the victims described it. It's just, how do you have no memory after taking 2 sips of a vodka drink? Come on, right? Obviously, something has been put in it. So, Viking Wolf by Blood. What the hell is is on a PowerPoint in a sexual assault case that could possibly be useful? Text to guide the case through for the prosecution and the defense. If you said something about it earlier, I missed it. My apologies. No, you're good. I haven't. It's just like text. Excuse me. He takes a whiskey drink. He takes a vodka drink. Yeah, exactly. Just, it would have worked better if there was one victim, this defense. But across multiple victims whose stories are fairly similar and more or less consistent, you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. And of course, the fact they couldn't come forward because of the whole Scientology issue, which I believe. Like, for example, when remember that woman who came forward against a Supreme Court justice? Do you remember that story? Just God, what was his name? He's on the bench now. She was very hard to believe because it was like 40 years ago. She never made a police report. There was no reason for her not to have made a police report. She just kind of like swept it under the rug. And all of a sudden she appears out of the blue and says, he sexually assaulted me. Kavanaugh. Yes, Kavanaugh. That was a bizarre one. That one I did not believe. It was very difficult to believe that one. Thanks, Viking. Kavanaugh was like, she came out of the blue and was like, yeah, I have no evidence. I have no witnesses except like maybe one college mate or something, which was like her best friend. I don't know. It was really weird. That one was really weird. This one is not weird because the reason they didn't come forward is because of the whole Scientology. The Church of Scientology frowns upon going outside the Church of Scientology when you're reporting someone for a crime, which, by the way, if that does not reek of a cult right there, I don't know what does. Like, that's the first hallmark. You do not go outside the church. You want to, if another church member did this to you, if a non-church member, you go ahead, that's fine. But if a church member did this to you and you go outside the church to report them, then you will be labeled as a suppressive person and your life is basically over. So I made a note of that because I wanted to talk about it. This closing would have worked a lot better if there was only one victim, not when there are 4. and 3 of them are being charged. It's just not working. But I understand. Maybe that's all he's got. Maybe that's all Cohen knows, and he has limited defenses to work with. It's quite possible. It's quite possible. At 2:25 p.m., the jurors collectively appear completely unfazed and unswayed by the closing that the defense is doing, like they did with the prosecution. Now, we'll see if there's going to be a shift when the prosecutor gets up there. And I wrote that kind of a mental reminder for myself and to tell you all. Remember how I said in the beginning, they all kind of perked up and they were nodding a little bit. And then when the prosecutor sat down and the defense attorney got up there, Cohen started talking, and they all just like completely started whelp looking and side-eyeing and doing one of these and like all of that. So I'm like, let's pay attention. I want to make sure that I catch on to see how they react when the prosecutor gets up there, because we are very lucky. Unlike in Kentucky, where you have the defense goes first, then the prosecution, then they go deliberate. Here, the prosecution goes first, defense goes second, and then the prosecution goes again, which is really nice. Unless you're the defense attorney, I guess. I would not. This is the only time I would not like it. But at least you get to hear what the prosecution's arguments are, which is kind of nice. It appears like Cohen is just trying to pepper in as much doubt as he can with the limited time he has, and he's doing a terrible job at it because there's really not all that much. Number 11, now this was obvious. He's starting to fall asleep. Same with number 3, and even number 4. A few times I caught her resting her eyes, at least once for sure, possibly twice. The jury appears again to have already made up its mind. Like, they didn't need the closing arguments to be like, oh, so let's see, I make sure I have this case correctly. They were there. They heard the testimony. They've heard the evidence. They made a decision individually. Now they had to go back and deliberate collectively. Now at 2:30, as Cohen begins to talk about something, number 12 glances at the clock on the wall unapologetically. Like, he's just like, literally like, are you done? Like, it looks at the clock and looks back, like, not even trying to hide it. Not even trying to hide it. No, number 4, this is where I caught her resting her eyes briefly. As the Cohen continues to try and cast doubt, number 6 whelps now for the first time. The older male. Despite it all, somebody already asked me this in the beginning, and I have it in my notes here. Despite it all, I must say Cohen is a phenomenal litigator. I cannot say otherwise. No question. He did a great job. But the problem is, when you feed shit, this is what I wrote. When you feed shit into the machine, you're going to get shit back out. You can't change the facts. And the facts are what they are. It's a totality of the circumstances. The totality of the circumstances here are just bad. They're just bad. Really bad. Wouldn't it be amazing? At one point, Cohen says this. I couldn't believe he said that. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if the prosecutor actually came forward after like all this doubt that he peppered in, right? All these inconsistencies that he talked about, all this stuff that's been happening in the case. Wouldn't it be amazing, Cohen says, the prosecutor actually came forward and said, look, we got a lot of problems in this case, ladies and gentlemen. Our witnesses are not believable witnesses. We have a lot of problems in this case. We have a lot of inconsistencies. Wouldn't it be amazing, ladies and gentlemen, if the prosecution actually came forward and said that? Not a single juror budged. No nod, no agreement, nothing. Nothing. Like, Cohen is just blowing smoke. Now, when Cohen gets back to reasonable doubt, so he started with reasonable doubt, then he went through all the evidence in the case and all the facts, and now he's going back to reasonable doubt at the very, very end. Number 7 smacks her lips skeptically. Number 1 is still tuned out. Cohen makes a very, very beautiful green light analogy. Basically saying like how we always put our lives almost in danger, ours and our loved ones' lives in danger when we approach a green light under the assumption that it is nobody like spray painted it green, that it's actually green and we can go through without getting hit by somebody else in the intersection. And that's kind of the thing here. Like when you go back to deliberate, that's what reasonable doubt is. You are reasonably believing that, we have the green lights here, and you're not going to be like, well, it could be red. It could have been yellow. It could have been fucking purple, blue, every color of the rainbow, right? But you kind of, it's the whole reasonableness argument. And even to that, number 3 whelps, number 7 looks down, number 4 has folded her arms, and number 7 continues to purse her lips. Not a whelp, but more of a pursing this time. We take a break at 2:55 for 15 minutes. We're back from the break at a little bit, actually less than 15. I think I was like, oh, I got some time, and I show up right when the jury's walking in at 3:05. Maybe I got my time wrong. I don't know. The prosecutor now does his rebuttal. And something I did not expect happened. Number 1 suddenly perks up and is glaring at the prosecutor very intently. Remember how I said he basically tuned out for the entirety of Cohen's closing? I have no doubt in my mind that number 1 believes that Danny Masterson is guilty. So we have at least one. So if we're not going to get a guilty verdict in this case, we are, by God, going to have a hung jury. Because I don't think you can sway that man of anything. He's got his convictions, and he's going to stick to them. Number 1, the older white man in the corner, as soon as Mueller got back up there, number 1 literally just woke up from his 2-hour-long slumber of Cohen's closing. Now, don't get me wrong. Number 1 definitely kind of paid attention a little bit. He looked at the PowerPoint sometimes that Cohen was posing, and he looked at him a few times. But 98% of the time, number 1 was tuned the fuck out. Every time I looked at him, he was not paying attention. He was not looking at Cohen. He was just looking at the floor, looking over there. Just bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. It's rare you see someone who's like so on one side versus the other. So openly, so obviously. Or maybe it's just me. I don't know. Jury collectively now suddenly, again, you got to pay attention to these things, because if you don't, you will miss them. What is the vibe like? Some people don't believe in this stuff. I am telling you from firsthand experience, if you pay attention, you will see it. Collective experience over time has allowed me to do this. My own jury trials, observing the Johnny Depp trial, observing the Kristen Smart trial, observing other trials in my own jurisdiction back in the day when I was watching trials. It takes time. It's not like you're going to wake up one day and be like, you know what? I'm going to be a jury announcer. I'm going to be a jury reader. Why not? Fuck yeah. Sounds like a great thing to do. Me being a trial attorney, I already have the experience to the minimalist degree, right? And that gives me the edge. And I know what to look for. It's not everyone is going to be able to do that, but I think everyone has the ability if they try. It's not rocket science. It just takes a little bit of understanding. And I can tell you that collectively, as soon as Mueller got back up there, Cohen sat down and Mueller got back up there, the jury collectively just looks more attentive all of a sudden. They kind of perked up. They're paying attention. Number 1 woke up from his slumber, like I said. Number 7 even turned her chair towards the prosecutor. She has had her chair like this towards the PowerPoint and was just kind of giving the shoulder to, at best, the shoulder. Sometimes you'll be lucky to even get like a little bit of a side eye. Now the whole chair was turned to the prosecutor. I mean, absolutely telegraphing what she believes. None of the jurors, except number 2, are now falling asleep. This is like 3:20. At 3:30, number 7 glances quickly at the clock. And at 3:35 p.m. local time Pacific, the prosecution concludes their case. And the jury goes back to deliberate. Who do I think the 4-person is going to be, by the way? It's very hard to say since I've only got a chance to observe them for a couple of days, and yesterday was very minimal. I can tell you that I think either number 1, number 7, or number 12 are the best candidates. 1 is actually unlikely. But maybe 7 or 12. I don't know. 1 just seems kind of a pacifist. He has his convictions, but he doesn't seem like he would be very vocal about his desire to be like, it's not his shtick. He's just gonna be like, look, I'm gonna tell you what I think, but I don't need I don't need to be like the leader of the pack. Like that's behind him. He's not one of those. So yeah, I believe, as the title of the video suggests, which I have not changed and I will not change, the title of the video is Danny Masterson will be found guilty by a jury in 2 days. Here's why. And now you know why. And why do I think it's going to take them 2 days? I think they're going to come back on Thursday. So they obviously didn't have enough time today. Today they had like 15 to 30 minutes of deliberations. That's not enough time. Tomorrow, they're going to sift through. They're going to sort. So today they picked a 4-person. They organized what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. They set a timeline. They said they have an idea of who probably they probably took a vote. Like, does anybody who thinks guilty, not guilty? It's very possible. Jurors do that sometimes at the outset, just to kind of get a clear, like if you've seen, again, 12 Angry Men, not with Jane Fonda, with the Henry Fonda. Sorry, I misspoke last time. Obviously, like I said, my head was not in the correct headspace. I was trying to make sure that I get all my facts out to you all. So I apologize for that. But yeah, that's today. So today's over. I mean, that's it. Back home, it's like 9 o'clock in the evening. Here, it's 5 o'clock. Court actually adjourns at 4 p.m. and the jurors must be gone by 4:30. So they're already gone. They already went home. Most of them are already home by now. And they're going to continue deliberations tomorrow. Now, initially, I was told that Friday is a dark day. It's possible that they will reach a verdict on Friday, but I don't know. I have a feeling that we're going to have a verdict Thursday, just because that's all the time they need. That's all the time they need. They did the initial heavy lifting today. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day for them of discussions and talking and conversing and figuring things out. And that's Wednesday. And then Thursday, by the end of the day, they'll have a decision. Now, it is possible they'll have a decision Friday afternoon. That would be 2.5 days. But I have my premonition and I'm sticking to it. So I think we're going to have a decision by Thursday evening or at the latest Friday afternoon. But the problem is, and this is the biggest problem that we have, is that the attorneys are going to be notified. And unless the public, myself, I'm the public here, actually gets, sits in the courtroom for the next 2 days, literally just sitting in the courtroom waiting for the jury to come back with a verdict. I have other stuff to do. I'm not going to be sitting there. I might as well go to the Harvey Weinstein trial, which is next on my list. I'm not going to be able to get the verdict. So you guys will probably find out the verdict before I do. We told Legal Vices that the verdict on Terry might be today, and he swore tomorrow or Thursday. Nope, this afternoon. Terry, who? I'm sorry. Verdict on Terry. Can you please clarify, Rose? And thank you very much, Viking, for the 10. Get some dinner on me. You deserve it. Thank you. Whew. Man. By the way, how did Daryl Brooks go? Oh, Michael Terry, the stabber in Florida. Okay. I mean, look, it killed his girlfriend. Okay. It's possible. I mean, like I said, that killing a girlfriend, like murder cases can come back a lot faster. This one, we have 3 victims. We have 12 jurors. You know, it takes time. It's not, I don't think it's that quick. It's not that simple. I don't think it's going to go that fast. But by the way, some of you may or may not know. I actually don't know if she posted about it, but Colonel Kurtz has invited me to talk about the case with her today. So I should be heading over to her channel in about half an hour. So I'm going to go eat right now. My food is waiting for me. I am very excited to eat, as I have not eaten yet today. I literally have gone the whole day without eating, and that's not uncommon for me, especially when I'm in like work mode. But I am not gonna lie, you guys, it just hit me. I am absolutely fucking starving. So you're welcome for me not to eat on stream again. And join me on Colonel Kurtz's channel in about half an hour, maybe 25 minutes or so. We planned on 6:30. Was it 6:30? Yeah, 6:30. Or no, maybe I don't know. I'm sorry. It may be in an hour and a half. I don't know. I'll message Colonel Kurtz, and figure it out. It's very hard because she's like on Central. I'm on Pacific. My calendar is on Eastern time. I can't keep up anymore. I don't know what time it is. I just go with the flow. 7:30. Okay, so I have an hour and a half. Never mind. I have about an hour and a half. I'll be on her channel in about an hour and a half. So thank you all very much. I very much appreciate you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. And I will see you all in the next video, probably about Harvey Weinstein. I guess we'll see. Bye, everybody.